Mark Zuckerberg might actually be based. He's making a lot of changes to Facebook inside and out, and on Joe Rogan's show, he said that he actually believed this kind of stuff, that the election didn't influence, or I shouldn't say the election didn't change his thinking, it just helped influence the push. Now, here's the thing, right? Still with Mark Zuckerberg, I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. I mean, here's the thing, right? We've had years of Facebook censoring. They were the worst censor by far for the longest time. So much so that they're considered a dead platform, like to the point where only boomers are on it because people who are like proper influencers can't make money. Now, I'm not saying I'm an influencer because obviously I've got no real influence, right? But, I mean, he might actually be based. Now, I don't trust him, but I do want to see more of this because if this is a grift, shit, we can have more of these grifts. These are great grifts. Because I think what he's trying to do is take a page out of Elon's book. Because basically, he's like gone hardcore, right? We'll see in this New York Times article, but he has changed policies on Facebook's moderation, which is great. But he's also changed policies on Facebook as a company. Like, he has removed, or he has ordered the tampons to be removed from the men's room, and so on and so forth, to the point where, like, some of the LGBT, quote-unquote LGBT employees have resigned or said they're going to start looking for work elsewhere. And he lamented the progressivism of Silicon Valley, and he was basically saying that he felt pressured by the government and by Silicon Valley to have the controls he had. Now, I don't know if I entirely believe that, but Zuckerberg's got some cojones now. I don't know if it's the fact that he does jiu-jitsu and he's actually got some testosterone going through his blood, the fact that he's friends with Dana White and he brought him on the board, or what's going on, or just the fact that he's trying to grift because Trump came into office. But, like, this is a good thing. This is something where, honestly, as long as people keep doing this as grifters, I won't even call them grifters. Because why would I want to, like, disavow good things, right? Because I kind of think of it almost as Pavloving, right? The whole, you guys ever heard of the Pavlov experiments where basically animals were tested and basically rewarded for doing good things and then punished for doing bad things. And what Pavlov found is that animals are more likely to do good things if they're rewarded versus not do bad things if they're, punished, right? So I say reward these people. Call them good people. Accept them, right? Now, I'm not saying that we can't call them out for bad things that they do, because we can't. I mean, whenever Facebook had bad policy, we needed to call him out because Facebook had terrible policy. But now that he's got good policy, I mean, shit, good for him. Congratulations. It's actually good. Now, let's get into this New York Times article. This is a longer one. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I'm going to skip through some parts here, but I'll leave the relevant parts in. Inside Mark Zuckerberg's sprint to remake Meta for the Trump era. Mark Zuckerberg kept the circle of people who knew his thinking small. Last month, Mr. Zuckerberg, the chief executive of Meta, tapped into a handful of top policy and communications executives and others to discuss the company's approach to online speech. He decided to make sweeping changes after visiting President-elect Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago over Thanksgiving. Now he needed his employees to turn those changes into policy. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Zuckerberg and his handpicked team discussed how to do that in Zoom meetings, conference calls, and late-night group chats. Some subordinates stole away from family dinners and holiday gatherings to work, while Mr. Zuckerberg weighed in between trips to his homes in the San Francisco Bay Area and the island of Kauai. What did I say? Kauai? I don't know. By New Year's Day, Mr. Zuckerberg was ready to go public with the changes, according to 4 current and former Meta employees and advisors with knowledge of the events who were not authorized to speak publicly about the confidential discussions. The entire process was highly unusual. Meta typically alters policies that govern its apps, which include Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Threads, by inviting employees, civic leaders, and others to weigh in. Any shifts generally take months, but Mr. Zuckerberg turned this latest effort into a closely held 6-week sprint, blindsiding even employees on his policy and integrity teams. On Tuesday, most of Meta's 72,000 employees learned of Mr. Zuckerberg's plans, along with the rest of the world. The Silicon Valley giant said it was overhauling speech on its apps by loosening restrictions on how people can talk about contentious social issues such as immigration, gender, and sexuality. It killed its fact-checking program that had been aimed at curbing misinformation and said it would instead rely on users to police falsehoods. And it said it would insert more political content into people's feeds after previously de-emphasizing that very material. In the days since the moves, there have been sweeping which has sweeping implications for what people will see online, have drawn applause from Mr. Trump and conservatives, derision from fact-checking groups and misinformation researchers, and concerns from LGBTQ advocacy groups for the fear the changes will lead to more people getting harassed online and offline. Listen, this is a good move. I mean, obviously he's just following what Musk did. He might be grifting. I'll be honest, I don't care. Grift more like this. That's great. Now here's the thing, right? The fact checkers and the LGBTQ people, which, you know, that acronym grows longer every day, they can all screw off because they're the reason why these policies were in place in the first place. Why is it that leftists were allowed to police everything? Because they had the culture. But now conservatives had the culture and they're all bitching and moaning and crying and begging. But they weren't whining whenever they had controlled the culture, and they always derided conservatives. They always derided centrists even whenever they complained about the culture and about the fact that people were being being censored for saying anything right of left. Honestly, even centrists were being censored. I got censored on Facebook myself, and so now obviously I wasn't doing YouTube at that point in time. It was just comments and whatnot, but still. So I honestly don't care what they think. I don't care if fact checkers are upset because they don't deserve their jobs. They're terrible at their jobs. Because here's why. Fact checkers always do this thing where they will spin everything to every way that they can to make it seem like it's false. Like, instead of saying, you know, Donald Trump is, you know, like if you say Donald Trump is not being punished for his felony counts, they'll say untrue. Donald Trump was sentenced in his felony counts, but instead of a traditional punishment, he was punished by giving him, you know, the what's the word for it? The unconditional discharge. So that was his punishment. And they'll say it was false. They'll say, you know, you lied. You said he wasn't punished. He was. It just wasn't the punishment you wanted, or whatever. And it's like, for all intents and purposes, he wasn't punished. They'll do the same thing where they say, like, Donald Trump, someone will say, Donald Trump ate a hamburger on Tuesday. And they'll say, fact check false, or partially untrue. Donald Trump did eat a hamburger, but it wasn't a hamburger. It was a Big Mac. And he didn't do it on Tuesday. He did it on Wednesday morning. And it'll be some BS like that where it's like, you are nitpicking the slightest possible things for no damn reason, just so you can say it's false. Because people don't read the actual fact checks. That's the problem. And that's fine. I mean, I understand people are busy and people's attention spans are short now because TikTok. But you can't go around lying to people and expect people to take you seriously. You can't go around lying to people and expect to keep your place in society. Like, I'm sorry you're losing your job, but honestly, no, I'm not. I don't care because you're terrible. I mean, you are the bane of our society because you are policing free speech, and you can't do that. Either way, inside Meta, the reaction has been sharply divided. Some employees have celebrated the moves, blah, 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 don't care. On Friday's Meta's makeover continued when the company told employees it would end its work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Massive win. It eliminated its chief diversity officer role, which is something that people don't need to pay for in the first place. Companies literally waste hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, on what is an entirely useless role. Chief diversity and inclusion officer? That's literally someone who gets paid to yell at people, who gets paid to be a leftist dipshit. I mean, this is great for Meta. Honestly, I might get some Meta stock, to be honest. Like, this is good stuff. Yeah, ended its diversity hiring goals, which is phenomenal as well. They called for the employment of a certain number of women and minorities and said it would no longer prioritize minority-owned businesses when hiring vendors. Meta planned to focus on how to apply fair and consistent practices that mitigate bias for all, no matter where your background. Janelle Gale, Vice President of Human Resources, said in an internal post that was relayed to the New York Times. In interviews, more than a dozen current and former Meta employees, executives, and advisors to Mr. Zuckerberg described the shift as serving a dual purpose. It positions Meta for the political landscape of the moment, with conservative power ascendant in Washington as Mr. Trump takes office on January 20th. More than that, the changes reflect Mr. Zuckerberg's personal views of how his $1.5 trillion company should be run, and he no longer wants to keep those views quiet. Listen, I don't know if I believe that, but I'm happy that this is happening. Mr. Zuckerberg, 40, has regularly spoken to friends and colleagues, including Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist and Meta board member, about concerns that progressives are policing speech, the People said. He's also felt railroaded by what he views as the Biden administration's anti-tech posturing and stung by what he sees as progressives in the media and in Silicon Valley, including in Meta's workforce, pushing him to take a heavy hand in policing discourse, they said. Meta declined to comment, which is probably a good thing. In an interview with the podcaster Joe Rogan on Friday, Mr. Zuckerberg said it was time to go back to our original mission by giving the people the power to share. He said he felt pressured by the Biden administration and the media to censor content, adding, "I have a much greater command now of what I think the policy should be, and this is how it's going to be going forward." The changes were catalyzed by Mr. Trump's victory in November that month. Mr. Zuckerberg flew to Florida to meet with Mr. Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Meta later donated $1 million to the president-elect's inaugural fund. At Meta, Mr. Zuckerberg began preparing to change speech policies. Knowing that any moves would be contentious, he assembled a team of no more than a dozen close advisors and lieutenants, including Joel Kaplan, a longtime policy executive with strong ties to the Republican Party, Kevin Martin, the head of U.S. policy, and David Ginsburg, the head of communications. Mr. Zuckerberg insisted on no leaks, which obviously that didn't work out. The people with knowledge of the effort said. The group worked on revising Meta's hate speech policy, with Mr. Zuckerberg leading the charge, they said. They changed the name of the policy, which lays out what to do with slurs, threats against protected groups, and other harmful contents on its apps, to hateful conduct. That effectively shifted the emphasis of the rules away from speech, minimizing Meta's role in policing online conversation. Mr. Kaplan and Mr. Martin were cheerleaders of the changes, these people said. Mr. Zuckerberg decided to promote Mr. Kaplan to Meta's head of global public policy to carry out the changes and deepen Meta's ties to the incoming Trump administration, replacing Nick Clegg, a former deputy prime minister of Britain who had handled policy and regulatory issues globally for Meta since 2018. The night before Meta's announcement, Mr. Kaplan held individual calls with top conservative social media influencers, two people said. Honestly, Nick Clegg being the head of global policy explains so much as to why Meta was as shit as it was. The fact that these changes are happening is phenomenal. And hopefully Joe Kaplan isn't the rhino I think he is. Hopefully these things are good. On Tuesday, Mr. Zuckerberg made the new speech policies. We already saw it. Don't care. Mr. Kaplan appeared on Fox and Friends, a mainstay of Mr. Trump's diet, saying Meta's fact-checking partners had too much political bias. Fact-checking groups that worked with Meta have said they had no role in deciding what the company did with the content that was fact-checked. Bullshit. They knew good and well that when they fact-checked something, Meta took it down. That is horseshit, and they need to stop lying, because that is all fact-checkers are capable of doing. Lying. Like, people literally have to fact-check the fact-checkers. I have fact-checked the fact-checkers. Among its changes, Meta loosened rules so people could post statements saying they hated people of certain races, religions, or sexual orientations, including permitting allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation. Listen, it's bad to be racist, right? We all agree on this. We all know this. But you should not police someone from saying what they want to say. That skinhead over there should be allowed to say that they hate Jews, or they hate black people, or they hate whoever. And people are allowed to say that they hate them. Because everyone hates skinheads, right? But they should be allowed to say what they want, and then people should be allowed to say, you're an idiot. That's how the world should work. We shouldn't just stop them from saying it altogether, because that both hides who the bad guys are, and also just isolates them into an echo chamber where it gets worse and worse. The fact that they're doing this will honestly reduce racism around the world, I would assume, because there will be less echo chambers. You can go on Facebook, you can go on Twitter, you can go on Instagram, and you could say whatever dumb shit you want to say, and people will just say you're an idiot. Instead of it being removed, you get to say it, and people get to see your ideas, and people get to give you their ideas. That's better for the world. It's stupid that they did it in the first place. Or that I should say it's stupid that they censored it in the first place. The company cited political discourse about transgender rights for the change. It also removed a rule that forbade users from saying people of certain races were responsible for spreading the coronavirus, which was a dumb rule in the first place. Some training materials don't care. We do. Some training materials that Meta created for the new policies were confusing and contradictory to employees who reviewed the documents said. Some of the text said that saying white people have mental illness would be prohibited on Facebook, but saying gay people have mental illness was allowed, they said, because people are not a monolith. I mean, whether or not you believe gay people have mental illness is not the point. You should be allowed to say that. Now, I think also people should be allowed to say white people have mental illness. Because anyone should be able to say whatever they want. That doesn't mean people agree with it, but they should be allowed to voice it. Besides, that'll let us see who the idiots are. Meta locked access to the policies and training materials internally late on Thursday, said hours after The Intercept published excerpts. The company also removed the transgender and non-binary themes on its Messenger chat app, which is based as hell. which allows users to customize the app's colors and wallpaper, two employees said. 404 Media earlier reported on the change. That same day at Meta's offices in Silicon Valley, which this is super based. In Silicon Valley, Texas, and New York, facilities managers were instructed to remove tampons from men's bathrooms, which the company had previously provided for non-binary and transgender employees who use the men's room and who may have required sanitary pads, two employees said. Can I just say, this is the most base thing I've ever seen Zuckerberg do, and all these employees that we're about to read about in a second can cope and seethe. Some employees were livid at what they saw as efforts by executives to hide changes to the hateful conduct policy before it was announced, two people said. While people across the policy division typically view and comment on significant revisions, most did not have the opportunity this time. Good. On Workplace, Meta's Slack-like internal communication software, employees began arguing over the changes. In the @Pride employee resource group, where workers, we know they support the LGBT. At least one person announced the resignation as others privately relayed to each other that they plan to look for jobs elsewhere, two people said. Good, I hope they do. I hope they find a job at some other trash company that will censor, and then they lose all their business. Great, that's good. In a post this week to the Pride group, blah, 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 they defended the Zuckerberg, said the transgender issues have become politicized. He said Meta's policy should not get in the way of allowing societal debate and pointed to Roe v. Wade, the landmark abortion case, as an example of courts getting ahead of society in the 1970s. Mr. Schultz said the courts politicized the issue ahead of allowing it to be debated civilly. You find topics become politicized and stay in the political conversations for far longer than they would have if society just debated them out, Mr. Schultz wrote. He said that looser restrictions on speech in Meta's app would allow for this kind of debate. In his interview with Mr. Rogan on Friday, Mr. Zuckerberg denied making sweeping changes to appease the incoming Trump administration, but said that the election did influence his thinking. The good thing about doing it after the election is you get to take this cultural pulse, he said. We've got to this point where there were these things you couldn't say that were just mainstream discourse. Zuckerberg is based. He might be grifting, but I don't care. This is based, and as long as it stays this way, I won't call him a grifter anymore. That's base as hell. Hopefully he continues being like this, because, overall, this is a good thing for the world, and I hope it continues, because this is awesome. Yeah. Hopefully things continue to go this way. Hopefully the leftists lose their grip on culture even more. Hopefully conservatives and centrists and people who are right of the left, far left, can take back what was once ours. And yeah, you guys are part of that. I'm part of that. Everyone involved in this space who's, saying things saying base things, right? Saying conservative things, saying centrist things, just pushing back against leftism are part of that change. And we're winning, guys. We're winning, and hopefully we stay winning. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got to say about that. Next segment's coming up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Make sure to smash the like button. Comment down below. Tell me what you think about this. Tell me if you think it's based, or if you think Zuckerberg's a grifter, or if you think it's a bad thing. Subscribe and share this video with everyone you know. See you guys in the next one.